All right, so when I first saw You, no pun intended, the show on Netflix, I was intrigued by like the dark and mysterious vibes. So I I ended up watching like the first four or yeah, I think it was the first four episodes of it, and then I was like, "What the heck is this?" And I actually ended up moving on from it and watching some other shows. In between, I watched stuff like Mindhunter, Dexter, and True Detective, kind of in this genre of mysteries and crime shows and that sort of thing. So I was generally interested in the genre. So when I saw that You had a season two, I decided to come back and watch the whole thing. And I actually really got into it after I got past the first 4 or 5 episodes. Um, I got hooked on the concept. So I thought it'd be interesting to compare the main character of You, which is Joe Goldberg, to Dexter, one of my favorite crime shows, Dexter Morgan from the show Dexter. So I thought it'd be an interesting comparison for reasons that I will get into as I get into varying degrees of spoilers. I'm going to separate this into 3 sections of spoilers. First, I'm going to talk about it with very minimal spoilers for someone who hasn't seen either of the shows, or someone who might be partway through one of them or has seen one and not the other, so that you can kind of get an idea of comparing these characters and actually get something out of the video, even if you haven't seen them and you don't want everything spoiled. Then after that, I'm going to get into kind of minimal spoilers if you're familiar with the shows or don't really care that much about, I don't know, things that aren't huge like plot twists. And then finally, I'll get into an analysis with all spoilers. I'll do a warning at the beginning of each one. So I'm kind of generally interested in crime, true crime, these kind of analysis of people who do bad things sort of shows, because it's just interesting. I don't know, it's more exciting than dramas about people and I don't know. Yeah, anyway, I'm just trying to skip through my notes because there's so much random crap in here. Okay, yeah. So a very basic rundown for someone who hasn't seen the shows. Dexter is a several season TV show about a blood analyst by day, serial killer by night, named Dexter Morgan. Unlike most serial killers, unlike most killers, Dexter kills by code and targets criminals who kind of slip through the cracks of the justice system. And then You is about a young bookseller named Joe Goldberg who falls in love with a pretty stranger and develops a creepy obsession, determined to do anything to manipulate fate and make her fall in love with him. Interesting characters here. So first, we're going to do kind of minimal spoilers. This is just going to be basic information about the show that you would get from watching the first 1 or 2 episodes, so it really shouldn't spoil anything major for you. So both characters are kind of like sociopath, psychopath genre is how I would define. They aren't, I use those terms loosely because you can't like define that without a lot of spoilers, but both are like antisocial and have odd social interaction generally. Both could be kind of described as like cold and calculating characters, which are often like adjectives used to describe psychopath or sociopaths. And both like have tendencies to fake emotions. So they have like characteristics of sociopaths and psychopaths, but I don't think they exactly fit that description, because both have some kind of moral compass, both show some kind of empathy, and they actually both have successful relationships with other people like family and friends. So I don't think you can just lump them in, but I think it's a good descriptor for sort of the genre. Both of the shows are about kind of these protagonists who are like sort of, they would be the normal, they would be like the villain in most stories. So they'd be like the antagonist, but it's from the perspective of someone who, I don't know, is like leading a double life, and they live in sort of this morally ambiguous space. Yeah, you could almost define it as like TV shows about the antagonists instead of the protagonists. But anyway, we're now going to get into some basic spoilers. So this won't give any like major plot twists away, but if you're interested in seeing the shows and haven't watched all of them, here's your fair warning. So both of them are killers. So whether or not Joe is an actual serial killer is, you kind of need to get into further episodes to define that, because serial killers, you have to have like 3 or more kills. But anyway, within the first couple episodes, we know that both Joe and Dexter have some kind of body count as far as kills. Both of them are into like stalking and vetting. It's a little bit different because Dexter stalks people to make sure that they're like evil people, so that when he kills them, he like feels better, I guess, on his conscience about it. But then Joe, on the other hand, like he'll literally just stalk anyone, and like even the people he's interested in, and it's more of like I don't know, just like a creepy thing where he wants to know more about people so he can kind of manipulate things behind the scene. Also, in kind of basic spoilers, I thought it'd be interesting to compare and contrast their basic personalities. Dexter is sort of like monotonous and emotionless and really hilariously deadpan. I think it's what makes his character kind of an interesting take on like a serial killer. And then Joe, on the other hand, is like almost super dramatic compared to Dexter. Like you can see it in fight scenes or whatever. Like Joe will just completely lose it, and Dexter, on the other hand, will just like beat someone up silently and be like, I don't know. He has like everything together. And then further like kind of character or like personality differences that I thought were interesting was like from day one, Dexter completely avoids any kind of like intimacy, but then Joe, on the other hand, is like trying to get it. So that kind of fluctuates through the rest of the narratives. But without more of that, you kind of get into spoilers. So now we're going to get into some serious spoilers, kind of ascending in amount of spoiling. But this would be for someone who's seen at least pretty much if you've seen all of the shows. So I don't know, at this point, if you're interested in them, go watch them. They're both interesting shows, especially Dexter. I would definitely recommend. But yeah, let's get into it. So drum roll, this is the big one. So both are serial killers. Joe eventually gets a kill count of over 3 throughout the series. And Dexter, obviously, I mean, he's got like a freaking 50, 100, I don't know what his body count would be theoretically from like the writers or whatever, but it's up there. I mean, you see his like blood slides that he has of all the kills that he has. It's way up there. So I think that it's kind of hard because like you can't tell everyone that that's what the shows are about necessarily. I guess you can. That's not a spoiler for Dexter, really, but for you it is, and that's kind of what makes this comparison interesting. 2 different takes on stories from the perspective of serial killers, and let's see. I thought it's interesting because like our culture is so fascinated with serial killers. I think just because like generally we're fascinated with crime, and I think it's really interesting to see what like separates us from someone who would kill on a regular basis. and like what causes them, uh, stuff like, I don't know, common symptoms of someone who turns out to be a serial killer, like childhood trauma, head injuries, that sort of thing. It's interesting to analyze like what common factors go into it. Are they still around? Like, why were there so many serial killers in the 70s and 80s, but there aren't really anymore now? Or maybe there are and we just don't know about it because they're better at getting away with it. Ooh, anyway. Some really interesting similarities that I saw aside from that very basic thing is both stories both stories start with a romantic relationship with a blonde woman, and now we're going to get into huge spoilers, so yeah, if you haven't seen the shows and you want anything, get out now. If you haven't seen the shows and you want to watch them without spoilers, get out now. Both stories start with a romantic relationship with a blonde woman, and whose death is ultimately their responsibility. Both move on to date other women and end up falling for one who is also a manipulative killer. Whew. Yeah, so that gets pretty specific as far as like character interactions and stuff. Both mentor younger people who struggle with the same thing as them. I thought this was interesting. Joe has Paco in season 1 and Ellie in the second season. Or I guess Ellie isn't, she's not like a serial killer or something as far as we know yet. Or I guess Paco isn't really either, but they like struggled with, I don't know, I guess sort of abuse and growing up in difficult situations as kids. And then, Dexter has like Aster and Cody, who he's like raising, and Zach Hamilton, I think this is the right name of the guy, who is like a younger serial killer who he's trying to kind of mentor, which is like the weirdest thing to say in a sentence. But I think contrasting the two with a lot of spoilers, Dexter, the biggest differentiation between them, I would say, is Dexter is very organized and Joe is very disorganized. And then also the motive for their killing, I think, is very different. So Dexter is super organized, and that facilitates a lot higher body count, whereas Joe doesn't really plan anything, so his kills are kind of more out of necessity, and I think that's what also brings into question a lot whether you would actually define him as a serial killer, because even though he's killed a lot of people, they're all kind of for different reasons. So I think he would be one technically because of body count, but not really because of motive. He never plans them like from his kills from multiple days out. He only kills like Benji because he already had him kidnapped and had nothing else to do. He kills Peach sort of just to not get killed himself or caught. And yeah, he only kills Beck after she finds out about him. And an interesting comparison, both of them kind of rationalize their kills. So Dexter has his code and only kills people because he like finds them guilty of, I don't know, it varies a lot, but generally they're criminals who have like escaped any kind of consequences for their actions. Then Joe also rationalizes his kills, but he rationalizes his kills from like he's trying to get closer to whoever he's in love with. So he's like, oh, this guy like Benji is a real like scumbag or something, and Beck doesn't deserve him, so like he doesn't feel as bad about killing him. And another, I kind of touched on this earlier, but I think they have Joe is sort of more of a, like, I wouldn't say relatable, but he is more of like an average guy, As evidenced by like fight scenes, for example, he loses most of them and is sort of like weaker. He only ends up kind of like narrowly escaping all the time, whereas Dexter is like larger than life. He's sort of untouchable. Like when he fights people, it's usually like 2 seconds and he wins. He's got superior intellect. He's hiding like behind the cops and all this kind of stuff that makes him. I wrote down like larger than life. Yeah, I think it just makes Dexter's character more interesting because he exists in a world where there is like are actually people fighting for good, like Deb and Dokes, who are like kind of on to him, and they're actually fighting to. Well, there's this like moral ambiguity there because for Dexter, it's like the ends justify the means, and he would say he's sort of doing the right thing because he's really punishing criminals who got away, but he's definitely ignoring the whole criminal justice system, whereas Deb and Dokes are trying to do things by the book, and you could see them as being more morally upright because they aren't compromising their adherence to the justice system and that sort of thing. Touching back on how each of the characters interact with like intimacy and romantic relationships, they both kind of have character arcs with that because Dexter starts out trying to, or like he doesn't want any kind of intimacy, but then is successful with it when he does get with what's her face in the beginning. And then Joe, on the other hand, I feel I haven't watched the show recently, so I don't know. It's that weird thing where you like can picture a character and everything they do, but you can't put the name to the face. And then Joe, on the other hand, he wants intimacy, but then as soon as he gets it, he like kind of fails at it. And then they both kind of have like successes and failures along the way. But I guess you isn't over yet. Well, Dexter isn't really over yet either. But I guess where you leave off most recently, and this is major spoilers, so definitely skip to. I'll throw in a timestamp to skip to if you don't want a spoiler up to the most recent season. But Dexter leaves off where he like distances himself from everyone in an attempt to protect them and just completely leaves love behind, whereas Joe ends up, I guess, sort of with the girl who he's supposed to be with. But you can see it kind of leaves off at a point where you're like, okay, it's probably like his cycle is going to repeat. And I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. But I think it's interesting that how they both kind of end up with another person who shares their like psychopathic tendencies or has also killed, so they can understand them, but they still have trouble being with that person. I don't know, which I think is just like trying to further the conflict and keep things interesting, because if they finally found the person who was good for them and lived happily ever after, then the story would end, you know? Or at least the conflict of the story, so it wouldn't be interesting anymore. Oh crap, I have a lot more notes. This is going to be super long, but I tried to talk as fast as I could so that it could be under like 5 minutes or something, but I guess that's just not going to happen. Okay, one last thing that I kind of want to touch about is like the themes that each show deals with. I think for Dexter, like the main question that it sort of asks is what is justice? Do the ends justify the means? Is justice adherence to the justice system, or if the justice system is corrupt and not working, can you achieve justice by bringing things into your own hands? Is ending a criminal's life a form of justice if you do that outside of the justice system? You know, like, it has all these questions about that. I think that's what makes Dexter such an interesting scenario and show. And then I think both kind of address the theme of like following a protagonist who has some sort of like sickness and issue that they're trying to overcome, and in both like instances it's an extreme issue. But I think that that's like a theme that it deals with. I wrote down both in a sense are stories about self-control and giving in to like desires that they feel are necessary. For Joe, it's like his romantic desires and doing anything to achieve that. And then for Dexter, it's his desire to kill, which he weirdly channels into a oddly sort of positive method, outlet. That's the word that I'm looking for. But yeah, I think both deal with self-control, which is actually a surprisingly relatable issue, because I think everyone has something that or multiple things that they struggle with and could use self-control with. So yeah, it's just an interesting theme. Yeah, so those are generally some of my thoughts on Dexter Morgan versus Joe Goldberg. I try to keep this video short and sweet by talking really fast and actually having a scripted outline. I didn't script everything. Like, I didn't just read everything that I wrote because I want it to really be my authentic thoughts. But I really like these two characters, and just analyzing them as a large departure from seeing things just from the perspective of the detectives who are trying to catch a serial killer, which I think, I don't know, just gets played out too much sometimes. So definitely let me know if you have any thoughts about these two in the comments. I would love to see some other Dexter or You fans, or just generally sort of crime show fans thoughts. And yeah, leave a thumbs down and unsub if you like the video or dislike it or whatever you want to do. And yeah, enjoy your day. Hope you enjoyed the content. See ya. Ooh. That's the most words per minute I've talked in the last, probably in my life. Probably in my life. Ooh.